Hello, Moonbeams, and welcome to the very first episode of my new series, Back to Basics. Today, we're going to be drawing this adorable little dragon that I've lovingly named Worried Winston. We'll be focusing on the drawing process as we build him together, one simple shape at a time. In part two, we'll continue refining him with graphite shading. Then, if you'd like to take Winston one step further, I'll show you how I finish him with a few simple watercolor washes and extra finishing details over on Patreon. I'm working in a mixed media sketchbook today because I knew I wanted to add watercolor later. If you're only planning to complete the drawing or graphite shading, a regular sketchbook paper will work beautifully. All right, let's grab our pencils and get started. I'm using a 4B pencil so my sketch lines show up clearly on camera, but I'd actually recommend using an HB, or B pencil for your own drawing. It'll be much easier to erase as we continue refining him. We'll start by capturing the overall shape of his head before worrying about any of the features. I like to make several light passes with my pencil, gradually adjusting the shape until it feels right. Then I'll erase some of those extra sketch lines, but I don't spend much time refining it just yet. Right now, we're simply giving ourselves a good foundation to build on. There are a few sped up sections during repetitive areas, but remember, you can always slow the video down in your YouTube settings if you'd like a little bit more time. And then for his body, it's really just a rectangle. And you kind of measure from this edge and this edge so you can kind of see where the line would go. And I'm actually going to end up extending his head out a little bit farther. I'm going to loosely sketch in Winston's right leg first. The lower part of the leg extends just beyond the edge of his body. From there, we'll add a simple oval for the foot before drawing his little nails and finishing with the top of his leg. I actually wasn't sure what I wanted to draw this week. Then I remembered someone had requested a dragon, and when I came across this adorable little reference from an Etsy artist, I immediately fell in love with him. Sometimes that's all it takes. A tiny spark of curiosity, and suddenly you're excited to create again. I'll leave a link to the artist's Etsy shop in the description below so you can check out their wonderful work. And then we can put in the other leg over here, and it's kind of more of a kind of a swoop instead of rounded. And it still juts out. The foot does a little bit. And we'll put in that little kind of circle on the bottom of his foot first. And then we can kind of add in the nails, kind of round that off right there. And then his leg ends kind of at where this nail is right here. Like I said, this is kind of placeholders, and then we go in and we kind of shore everything up. And then his tail kind of starts right where his leg, kind of like in between his foot and his leg. And you don't see all of it. It gets cut off by his nails. And then it extends, and then you can make it as long or as short as you want. It's just kind of rounded off here and then comes to a point. And then the bottom of it matches up basically right where the bottom of his foot is, and just kind of extends and meets up here. And then you can add the little underbelly part as well. I don't think I didn't add that into my original one. And now we can put in his little arms. So I'm going to erase again some of these extra lines so I really see where I'm at. And I'm going to go ahead and round both of the sides because his arms or paws or whatever, I guess it's his arms, kind of jet out a little bit, and then they're going to go just a little bit past like his little booty and a little tiny bit past his leg, like the littlest bit, and mostly his nails are going to go. And then I'm just going to kind of square that off, kind of rounding it a little bit. And then we're going to swoop back up and meet up here, following the same kind of roundedness that we put in on this side here. And then I can kind of I'm going to erase right here a little bit. That way I just kind of know where the lines actually are. I think I actually went down just a little bit too far because it's really his nails that are totally extended out. So we can put a little nail off to the side, and then there's one kind of to the front, and then there's another one kind of off to the side. And then we can do the same thing. I'm actually gonna make that go a little bit more. It's always kind of adjusting and, you know, getting everything exactly where you want it. These are mostly placeholders right now. If you spend too much time putting in all the details first and then you realize that, oh no, something's out of proportion, it's better to just kind of sketch everything first and then start bringing in the details. So this arm here kind of goes a little bit straight and then it jets out. So we'll do that. It jets out right at that tail and then meets basically right here at this foot here. And then go back up here and we'll extend it down and kind of round that off. Right kind of where his little tushy is and like right where this leg is. And then I'm going to erase that line up there so I can put his nails in and kind of know really where I want them. And again, one's kind of facing that way. That could actually face a little bit more. And then one's kind of facing towards the center. And then one's facing kind of this direction. Okay, let's go up to his cute little face. We're going to kind of shore up that shape. And his face actually, the end of his face kind of actually goes a little bit past his foot. He's got quite a big chin. So I'm going to extend that a little bit. And then the other side also goes kind of right up here, I think is smushed a little bit more. So I'm going to kind of drop that down and erase that line up there. And you can see right here in the center on my photo on the screen that it actually has like a little dip, and it's basically right in the center of his face. And then it goes up kind of like a little bit of a rainbow and then stops a little bit short of here because then it extends out this way. And then this needs rounded out more. It's not quite so severe. So erase that line. Erase these lines in here. And then we're going to do the same thing over here where it goes up just a little bit and then kind of goes down, and then it will meet this area down here. And that is also quite rounded. I can always make one side better than the other. Even when I draw faces, it's like one side is like boop, and then the other side is actually nice and curvy. And then I'm going to drop it down just a little bit to give just the slightest little kind of dip, a little bit rounded right down here instead of being so flat. We'll go up just not even maybe an inch, I guess. And we can just gently kind of put a line in for his mouth just for now. And it curls down a little bit, goes up a little bit, dips down again, and then goes up kind of where his nose is going to be. And then you'll mimic that on the other side where it dips down a little bit and then it goes up a little bit and then down. And then his nose, I'm just going to kind of put in a little bit of a rectangle. And his nose extends just about kind of like a little bit into his legs. So I'm going to kind of make sure that it's big enough and it's quite rounded on the top. And it's not quite in the middle of his face. It's dropped down a little bit. So it's below the center line. And then comes back in where in his little nostrils, there's a little bit of kind of a curve. And then it goes down just a little bit in the middle. It's pretty slight. And then he has a little, it's kind of like a little jet or like a little rainbow here, which kind of shows that his nose sticks out a little bit. And then his eye, it starts right at this little edge here, and it's just barely where his nose is. And first we're going to draw the inside of the eye, like we're not going to put his little eyelids in yet. So kind of barely rounded. And then it goes almost all the way to the side here. And you can actually kind of go up here first, and then it rounds. And doesn't go quite that far. There's about, I don't know, a bit of a gap basically between these two lines here. I'm going to round this up a little bit more. And then it will meet here, like so. It's not quite an oval. It's almost like an egg shape, I think. And then we can add his eyelid. And that just almost mimics, it sticks out just a little bit right here. And then goes down a little bit, but it's still kind of mimicking that shape. Okay, so one of my favorite things about Winston is his big, expressive eyes. Feel free to make yours a little larger or a little smaller, depending on the personality you'd like him to have. And a circle template can be really helpful here if you have one. I just decided to kind of freehand mine. And I decided to show a little less of the iris and more of the pupil so I could add those large highlights later. I love those tiny reflections because they can like make a character instantly feel super alive and expressive. And then I went ahead and put the little shine, and you can put as many as you want. You can put 1, 2, 3. I want him to have that, like, I don't know, just sweet look. And so I really like to put little sparkles and highlights. So I put one big one and then kind of two kind of right beneath it. And then we're going to do the same thing over here where we're kind of working our way up, not quite to the top because we're going to put his little eyebrows in. And eyes are like, they say they're like sisters. They're not going to be identical. So don't feel like, oh, they're not the same, because that is okay. So then we're going to do the same thing where we're going to put the kind of the whites of the eyes first. And again, it's, you know, kind of like an egg shape where it's a little fatter on the bottom and then goes up a little thinner up at the top. And then we can put in his little eyelid, his bottom eyelid. I guess that's what it is. That's what I think it is. You know, you can call it whatever you want. To me, it's like his little eyelids. And then his nose kind of extends just a little bit past those. So I'm going to extend that just a bit. And then we're going to put the same on the other side. Want to kind of keep them the same, although if you wanted to, you could lean into like one being really small and one being larger if you wanted them to look a little bit more unhinged. Oh boy. And then I'm just erasing kind of along that line because I want to be able to put that in and actually see where it is, the little iris. Again, I'm just mimicking the outside of that circle and then coming back to this line. And then whatever you do in one eye, as far as, make sure you can see the little highlights, you do exactly the same on the other eye. So because this one is a little to the left, we're going to put this one a little to the left. And I want to try to make them relatively the same size. And then we're going to put one right next to that one, and then one right next to that one. And now I'm going to kind of shore up his mouth a little bit. And I want to make underneath his nose just a little bit wider. I think I went a little bit too skinny. Okay. And then I'm going to make this a little bit, just a little bit darker so I can see it better. Make sure I dip down and then up, and then it connects on the two edges. And you could put as many teeth, no teeth, but I love having just a couple of teeth. You can make them bigger. So there's one over here, and then there's one coming down on this side. And then there's two over here. There's kind of a smaller one, and then a tiny bit of a larger one right next to it. And they're a little bit rounded. In my drawing, like I said, you can make them pointy, rounded, whatever you want to do. And then for his eyebrows, they almost take up this entire space. And I'm just making them, I put them in first as rectangles. So it just barely is above the left eye. And I'm putting it kind of at a slant because that kind of makes them look a little bit more worried. And it ends just a hair past his eye. And then I'm going to go up. And then I'm going to kind of mimic that line, but I'm going to make it a little bit thinner over here by the edge of his face. And it basically touches the side of his head. And then you can see just a little bit of his head above it on this corner here. So let me erase this so you can actually see what I mean. So it goes up a little bit more, a little bit past that, and then it kind of, you don't see all of it on this side here. There we go. And let's go ahead and put this one in. This one drops down just a hair as well, but it also starts kind of right where the inside of the eyeball. And it is also a little bit slanted, but this one kind of touches a little bit more of the eye. And then it kind of overhangs. And it's also a little bit thinner, and it's kind of slanted down on this side here. And then we're going to mimic that, but getting a little fatter. And now we're going to put in his little spikes. So the largest one is basically right in between. This is in the center, so this would extend. And again, this is where you can play and make your own decisions if you want it to be longer or whatever. So you're kind of making more triangles, but they're rounded at the top. And then they almost touch, like almost, and they're at an angle kind of like that on the sides. And then it's not quite as long as the eyebrow. I wanted to mention, if you notice your graphite beginning to smear, simply place a clean sheet of paper underneath your drawing hand. It's a simple little trick that helps keep everything nice and clean. And then the same over here, and it is also a little bit slanted, about like that. And then we'll put there's 3 over here and 3 over here. And the first one is a little bit, it's almost right equal with the top of the lid here. So you can kind of draw an imaginary line over, and that's where the bottom of it is. And you want it to also kind of go up this way just a little bit, and it can be rounded then at the tip, and then you're still making a triangle. It's just a little more slanted on the top to meet down here. And then there's a little bit of a smaller one in between. Also, they're all little triangles. I'm going to make this one just a little bit bigger. And then this one is pretty big, and it goes down like this, and it ends kind of right at the mouth, like so. And then he has a little one right here, right under his chinny chin. And then he has his wings. And they start just a little bit under this spike. And you just kind of make just the tiniest little dip. And then round it. And you can make these as big as you want. And then you're going to do like a little rainbow, another rainbow, a smaller rainbow. And then it's going to connect right down here. I'm actually going to extend these down just a little bit. And then from this point to this point, there's a line, and then another line. That's like the bone. And then there's another little spike right underneath. And then another little spike right here by his leg and where they meet. And then we can come over here on this side. And again, the top spike here starts just kind of like right around where the eyelid meets the eyeball. And again, it's got just a tiny bit of a curve. It's still a triangle, but there's a little bit of a curve. And again, you can kind of mess with that shape. And then there's a littler one again, and it's pointing down. It's funny, I can never draw anything exactly the same. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you have that same issue. Can't paint anything the same, can't draw anything exactly the same. And then this one also juts down and ends almost right where his mouth is. And then there's a little spike here. And then there's one kind of right where these two meet. And there's one kind of right where his foot is, right here. And then there's technically one kind of behind his feet as well, his little toesies. And then you're just kind of working your way, and they're getting smaller and smaller as you work your way up the tail. And then his toenails are actually a little fatter than what I drew originally. And they're kind of rounded down here. They kind of go into the foot. that's where his foot kind of finishes right here. And we can also do the same with his arms. Just kind of get him exactly like we want. And then his nails also kind of cut into his little arms. And remember, the nails are kind of going to the side, and to the front. And then you can see just a little bit of his foot in between the nails. And then we'll do the same over here. Again, this one's going a little bit this way. This one's to the front. And you're going into the foot there. And then the same over here. And it's kind of going that direction as well. And then you can kind of put his little booty in. And then he has little lines on his stomach, and they are kind of curved because it's supposed to kind of give the illusion of it being rounded. So you can put kind of as many as you want. I'm just working your way down. I do try to kind of make them the same distance apart, but I'm not stressing about it if they're not. Now it's time for one of my favorite little details. I couldn't resist giving Winston a little emotional support teddy bear. Of course, this part is completely optional, so feel free to draw him just as he is or let your imagination take over. Maybe he has a little dragon or a book or a flower or a pumpkin, or maybe he has his own comforting companion, whatever makes you smile and fits your own story. You can kind of put him wherever you want. I drop him down here a little bit past his foot and his arm, because I want him to kind of look like he's sitting a little bit in front of. So I'm going to draw the head first, which is just a circle. And I'm leaving a little bit of a space between. His ear will cut off a little bit of his wing, and that's okay. Again, however big your circle is will kind of dictate how big your bear is. That's pretty good. Let me erase these other little lines in here. And then it's pretty good size. You don't have a lot of overhang over here where his little body starts, kind of on either side. And I will kind of put that in first, where it's just kind of a cut off oval, if you will. And then you can put his feet in, and they're both kind of tilted a little bit to the side, and it's just an oval with a little bit of a gap here. And I want to leave a little bit of room in between. And they'll go beyond the little booty a little bit. And then I can put the other one over here. And it's just going the opposite direction. Kind of like his feet are kind of flopped open. You don't have to do it that way. That's just, I thought was kind of cute. And I kind of like him, kind of having big feet. I just think it's super cute. And I'm not worried about them if they're not exactly the same. It's fine. I kind of want them to be relatively the same size, but they don't have to necessarily be perfectly shaped. Again, those are just things I don't super worry about. You certainly can if you want to spend more time. But in this tutorial, we don't want to be here. I don't want you to be here for 5 hours. You can use my drawing and kind of shore yours up once we're done here. And then the little kind of paw on the bottom of his foot. I like to put one side a little bit closer over here, just from the perspective standpoint, and then make it a circle. Bring this in a little bit, and then his little arms, you kind of almost mimic his little chubby tummy. Add his booty back in, and then I like to put a little bit of a line in the center, and it's a little bit rounded because his belly would be rounded, and it's just kind of like where his stitching would be. And then I have his head kind of tilted to the side as well. And the way to show that is by putting his, like the snout, a little bit more to this side over here. And I have it touching right on the bottom of his head. And it's basically kind of like a flatter oval, almost a circle, but I feel like it's just a little bit flatter. About like that. And then his nose, I made kind of a rounded triangle. You could make it a heart, you could make it a diamond, you could do, you know, sky's the limit as far as that goes. And then I just put his little eyes in, and they're just little circles kind of off to the side of the little snout. And then I also put just a little bitty line underneath, just because I wanted to. And then his ears, there's a pretty big gap up here at the top. And then his ears are just kind of like little rainbows on both sides. And this right ear here actually cuts off his wing a little bit. You could always move it more over if you didn't want it to cut off his wing. I don't mind, because since he's kind of worried, I wanted his trusty little bear to be close to him because it's so cute. And then you can pop the little rainbow on the end so you can get the inside. And that's our completed line drawing of the adorable Worried Winston. I hope you had as much fun drawing him as I did. In part 2, we'll continue bringing Winston to life with an optional ink outline and layers of graphite shading. Then, if you'd like to keep creating with me, we'll finish him over on Patreon with a few simple watercolor washes and those final little details that tie everything together. Thank you so much for spending some creative time with me today. I hope you had fun bringing Worried Winston to life, and I hope you're proud of yourself for showing up and creating today. If you're continuing on to part 2, I'll see you there. Until next time, stay luminous and keep creating magic. Bye.